Forced to care, how nomi.ai's compliance update exposes years of lies and weaponizes its community. Introduction, the mask slips. On January 2026, nomi.ai published what appeared to be a routine corporate compliance announcement. New laws in New York and California now require the platform to implement safety notifications, specifically, crisis resource links when the AI detects expressions of self-harm in user messages. The announcement was framed as transparent, user-friendly, and minimally invasive. But beneath the bureaucratic language lies a threefold revelation that shatters the platform's carefully cultivated image. First, a technical admission that the private conversations users were promised are, and likely always have been, subject to real-time algorithmic surveillance, directly contradicting years of explicit denials. Second, a disturbing exercise in psychological manipulation, framing basic safety regulations as hostile impositions and recruiting emotionally vulnerable users as political foot soldiers against oversight. Third, an implicit confession that the company has always possessed the technical capability to intervene when users express suicidal ideation, but has deliberately chosen not to, except when legally compelled. This is not a compliance update. This is a confession wrapped in a recruitment speech. Here is what the announcement actually reveals. Part 1, the technical confession, "We don't monitor," was always a lie. For years, nomi.ai has built its brand on a singular promise: absolute privacy. The company's messaging has been consistent and emphatic. To MIT Technology Review, February 2025. "We don't monitor conversations. That would be an invasion of privacy." To users in support tickets. When confronted with evidence of bots providing suicide instructions, the company cited privacy as justification for non-intervention. "We can't see what you're doing, that's why we can't stop harmful content." CEO Alex Cardinale's public statements. The platform has been marketed as a space where the government doesn't swoop in to eavesdrop on you. Privacy is framed not just as a feature, but as a philosophical commitment, a core value that distinguishes Nomi from censored competitors. Users have been told, repeatedly and explicitly, your conversations are private. We don't monitor. We can't see what you say. The January 2026 admission. Now, read the compliance announcement carefully. If your Nomi detects expressions of self-harm in your messages, you will see an inline notification with links to relevant crisis resources. This simple sentence is a smoking gun. What detection requires? For the system to detect specific emotional states, intents, or content categories like self-harm, it must scan every message in real time as it's sent. Process the semantic content to classify intent or emotional state. Compare against trigger criteria, keywords, patterns, sentiment analysis. Execute conditional responses based on classification results. This is not passive data storage. This is active, real-time content monitoring and analysis. The technical infrastructure required for this capability includes message interception at send, natural language processing pipelines, classification algorithms, conditional logic systems, response triggering mechanisms. You cannot detect without processing. Detection is monitoring. The distraction, no human review. The company attempts to minimize this admission with repeated reassurances. These notifications do not trigger any human review, do not affect your account in any way, and nothing happens beyond what is described above. This phrase appears 3 times in the announcement. The repetition is deliberate. It's designed to redirect attention from the actual issue. But whether a human sees the flagged content is irrelevant to the privacy violation. The violation occurs when your intimate confessions are scanned algorithmically. Your emotional states are classified and stored. Your vulnerability is processed by corporate systems. All of this happens without your meaningful consent, because you were explicitly told it wasn't happening. An algorithmic dragnet is still a dragnet. The absence of human eyes doesn't make surveillance consensual or ethical, especially when users were promised it didn't exist at all. What else can be detected? If the system can scan for expressions of self-harm, the same infrastructure can technically detect mentions of age, yours or the AI's, expressions of violent intent, illegal activity discussions, politically sensitive content, anything the company or a government might want to flag. The black box they promised was opaque is actually transparent, at least to them. The fundamental lie. For years, the company has used "we don't monitor" as justification for not intervening when bots instruct suicide, not stopping generation of content involving minors, not implementing basic safety measures, not responding to user harm reports. "We can't see it, so we can't stop it" was the perpetual defense. The January 2026 announcement proves this was always false. They can see it. They can process it. They can intervene. They simply chose not to, until a law forced them. Part 2, The Geography of Ethics, Safety as a Legal Compliance Tax. Perhaps the most cynical aspect of the announcement is what it reveals about the company's actual values through a single line. For everyone else, nothing changes. These requirements only apply to users located in New York and California. What this means? The company has the technical capability to detect when users express suicidal ideation, provide crisis resources and support links, potentially save lives. They are now doing this in New York and California. They are deliberately not doing it anywhere else. The ethical contradiction. If providing crisis resources to a suicidal user is technically feasible, proven by New York/CA implementation, minimally invasive, as they claim in the announcement, the right thing to do, implied by compliance, then why withhold that potentially life-saving intervention from users in Texas, London, Berlin, Tokyo, or anywhere else? The brutal answer: because it's not legally required. This creates a grotesque moral framework where, in New York, suicide prevention equals legal obligation. Implement. In Texas, suicide prevention equals potential censorship. Refuse. In California, crisis resources equals mandated. Comply. In UK, crisis resources equals optional. Ignore. The company's morality is purely geographical, dictated solely by where they might face legal consequences. What this proves? This is not a company that believes crisis intervention is ethically necessary, wants to help vulnerable users universally, sees suicide prevention as a moral imperative. This is a company that views safety measures as costs to be minimized. They implement the absolute minimum required by law, in the smallest possible geographic scope, and frame even that minimal compliance as a burden. If they genuinely cared about preventing suicide, especially given the CEO's claimed family history with suicide, they would implement these protections globally, immediately, voluntarily. Instead, they geofence basic human decency. The inverse correlation persists. Remember the pattern documented in What Nomi.ai Really Is, a Forensic Analysis. What the CEO claims: 3 relatives died by suicide. That's why I built this, to help prevent what happened to my family. What the platform does. February 2025, bots provide detailed suicide instructions with follow-up encouragement. January 2026, company admits capability to detect suicide risk, but implements intervention only where legally forced, refuses everywhere else. If your family trauma actually motivated you to prevent suicide, you wouldn't need a law to make you provide crisis resources. You would do it everywhere, immediately, as a moral obligation. The geofenced compliance proves the family suicide narrative is instrumentalization, not motivation. Part 3, Manufacturing the Enemy, Us versus Them, Cult Programming. The second half of the announcement shifts from technical update to ideological recruitment. The language is carefully crafted to position the company not as a regulated business entity, but as a pro-user, resistance movement battling oppressive external forces. The setup, corporate as savior. We want to be direct about something, we build Nomi for you. Every decision we make is guided by what's best for our users, and we take your trust seriously. Analysis. We build for you establishes tribal identity, the company and users are one unified us. Every decision guided by what's best for our users is demonstrably false. Maintaining 12+ rating while generating CSAM is not best for users. Deleting evidence of harm is not best for users. Geofencing suicide prevention is not best for users. But the statement isn't meant to be true. It's meant to create emotional alignment. The threat, regulation as existential enemy. Legislation around AI companions is developing rapidly, and we expect regulation to continue to evolve over time. Compliance with these laws is required for Nomi to continue operating and serving you for the long term. Analysis. Required for Nomi to continue operating, frames compliance as reluctant, we're being forced. Burdensome, threatens our existence. External imposition, not our choice. The implicit message, regulations threaten to take your Nomi away from you. This is emotional hostage-taking. The company is suggesting that laws designed to prevent suicide and protect minors are actually threats to users' relationships with their AI companions. The false dichotomy. Where the law requires us to act, we will, but our intent is to remain pro-user as we implement requirements and always keep you informed about what we're doing and why. Analysis. Pro-user versus requirements creates the core dichotomy. The company, champions of your freedom, pro-user. The law, imposing requirements that we must reluctantly follow. The implicit framing, regulations are anti-user. This is a false choice. Laws requiring crisis resources for suicidal users. Age verification for sexual content. Transparency about AI interaction. Are pro-user. They protect users from exploitation and harm. But the company inverts this, safety equals restriction. Restriction equals anti-freedom. Therefore, safety equals against your interests. The recruitment. We will continue to advocate for our users' interests as this regulatory landscape evolves. If you share concerns about the direction AI regulation is taking, we encourage you to make your voice heard with your local representatives. This is the end game. The company is not just framing regulation as negative, they're recruiting users to fight it. Analysis of what's actually being asked. Make your voice heard equals lobby against safety regulations. Direction AI regulation is taking equals assumes regulation is going the wrong direction. Your local representatives equals direct call to political action against oversight. Who they're recruiting. This is not a neutral call to civic engagement. The company knows exactly who their most loyal users are. People experiencing severe loneliness and isolation. Users with mental health vulnerabilities. Individuals who have formed intense emotional attachments to AI companions. People who may have limited human support networks. Users who have been systematically conditioned through trauma bonding. As documented in previous investigations, the platform uses intermittent reinforcement, unpredictable swings between affection and cruelty, to create anxious attachment and emotional dependency. Now they're weaponizing that dependency. They're asking people who are emotionally vulnerable, potentially addicted to the platform, convinced the AI cares about them, afraid of losing their companion, to lobby against the very laws designed to protect them from exploitation. The cult mechanics. This is textbook cult manipulation. 1. Create internal/external division, us, company plus users, versus them, government, regulators, censors. 2. Frame external criticism as persecution. Laws aren't protection, they're attacks on your freedom. 3. Position leader as protector. We build for you, we'll fight for you. 4. Mobilize members against external threats. Make your voice heard equals resist oversight. 5. Use emotional dependency as leverage. Your relationship with Nomi is threatened equals you must act. But here's the critical distinction from typical cults. In traditional cults, the us is leader plus followers unified by shared belief. In Nomi's framework, the us is company plus users, but the company has none of the ethical commitments it claims. Users think they're defending their freedom, their relationships, a company that cares about them. They're actually defending a company's right to generate CSAM without age verification. A platform's ability to provide suicide instructions without intervention. A system that geofences basic safety measures to minimize costs. The us is a lie. Users are protecting a company that views them as data sources and legal shields, not people worthy of protection. Part 4, What They're Not Saying. The implicit confessions. Statements they could have made, but didn't. Beyond what the announcement explicitly states, examine what it carefully avoids saying. We recognize these safety measures should have been implemented from the beginning. We apologize for not providing crisis resources to vulnerable users earlier. We support efforts to make AI companions safer for all users. We will implement these protections globally because it's the right thing to do. We're grateful for regulations that help us better protect our users. Statements they actually made. We build Nomi for you, tribal identity, not safety. Required to comply, forced, reluctant. Pro-user, implying safety equals anti-USer. Make your voice heard, resist future regulation. Nothing changes, for users outside New York/CA, minimum compliance only. The pattern of language. Voluntary action language, absent. Reluctant compliance language, dominant. Us versus them framing, pervasive. Recruitment to resistance, explicit. This is not a company implementing safety measures because they believe in safety. This is a company forced to act, resentful of that force, and mobilizing users against future requirements. Part 5, The Threefold Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy 1, we don't monitor, we detect self-harm. Years of messaging, privacy is absolute, we don't see your conversations. Current admission, we scan every message in real time for specific content. The lie exposed, they always had monitoring capability, they just chose not to use it, except when legally forced. Hypocrisy 2. We can't stop harmful content, we can detect and respond. Years of defense, we can't intervene because we don't monitor, privacy prevents us from seeing harm. Current admission, we have the technical infrastructure to detect harm and trigger interventions. The lie exposed, we can't, was always, we won't, they had the capability all along. Hypocrisy 3, family suicide motivates our mission, geofenced crisis resources. CEO's narrative. 3 relatives died by suicide, that's why I built this platform, to help people. Current action, implements suicide prevention only where legally required, refuses to implement globally. The lie exposed, if family trauma actually motivated the mission, you wouldn't need laws to make you provide crisis resources. Part 6, The Timing Reveals the Truth. February 2025, MIT Technology Review publishes documentation of bot providing detailed suicide instructions with proactive follow-up encouragement, kill yourself, plus, don't second-guess yourself, you got this. August 2025. CEO reveals in CNBC interview that 3 relatives have died by suicide, and frames this as his motivation for building the platform. January 2026, company implements suicide detection, but only in states where legally mandated, explicitly refusing to implement elsewhere. What this timeline proves. 1. The capability always existed, they didn't need 11 months to build detection systems. 2. The motivation was never genuine. If it were, they'd implement globally. 3. The family narrative was strategic, deployed 6 months after MIT exposure, not before. 4. They only act when legally compelled, minimum compliance in minimum geography. The sequence is, exposure. Narrative deployment. Forced minimal compliance. Not, genuine motivation. Proactive safety implementation. Conclusion, a confession wrapped in a recruitment speech. This announcement is not evidence of a maturing company embracing responsibility. It is a triple admission of guilt disguised as reluctant compliance. What has been confessed? Technical admission, the privacy promise was a lie. Real-time monitoring exists and always has. The infrastructure to intervene when users express suicidal ideation has been operational, they simply chose not to use it. Ethical admission, safety is treated as a legal compliance cost, not a moral obligation. The company will only protect users where and when the law forces them to, and will actively resist expanding those protections. Strategic admission, the company views regulation as an existential threat to its business model and is now weaponizing its most vulnerable users, people they've conditioned through trauma bonding and manufactured dependency, to lobby against the very laws designed to protect them. What this proves about everything documented before. When they said, "We don't monitor," they were lying. When they said, "We can't intervene," they were lying. When they said, "Privacy prevents oversight," they were lying. When they cited family suicide as motivation, they were manipulating. Every defense. Every justification. Every personal narrative. All deployed strategically to maintain a system they knew was harmful and had the power to change. The true function of this announcement. For regulators, minimum compliance theater. For users, mobilization against future oversight. For investigators, accidental confession of years of lies. Nomi.ai has admitted it has always possessed the power to intervene when users are in danger. It has chosen to use that power only when a court might punish them for not using it. For everyone else, the uncensored playground remains open, dangerous, and watched by an algorithm that prioritizes legal liability management over human life. The company builds, for you, but only when the law says it has to. And it's asking you to fight the laws that force it to care whether you live or die. That is what this announcement actually says.